Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Welcome to the Voice of Islam, the special Friday podcast. Alhamdulillah, with me today, I have Brother Jamshid. Brother Jamshid, today, inshallah, on our podcast, we will go through some of the questions that were, or comments actually, rather comments on our previous video that we did 10 days ago, inshallah. And we'll
Mhm.
go into answering those questions and go a little bit on the science issues that we talk about. I
Okay.
don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was one of the brother, well-known da'i talks about, how the whole science was debunked and da da da. And then, so people talk about how you have to stop using science in your da'wah and all that. So we won't go into detail, but we want to go back to those brothers and sisters who are looking for a bit of understanding about science and using science in da'wah, or how do we go through some of these common questions that people bring about. And of course, this is because of the points, the videos that we discussed 10 days ago with one of the famous YouTuber, Brother Karim, who interviewed one of the brother who say he doesn't believe in God. So Alhamdulillah, Brother Jamshid, anything you want to add on that, inshallah?
To this video,
Yes.
only that it only transpired afterwards. I was looking through, I think, the comments on the video, and I think there was a number of people that actually made similar comments to what we had discussed.
Hmm.
That this video was a really, really bad representation of dawah, and I think
Yes.
this brother's response was that he's not a dawah channel, he's not a da'i or
Correct.
whatever
Yeah.
have you. It's just people giving opinions. But I think even in that stead, this is just an example of the dangers of speaking and presenting yourself, wittingly or unwittingly, as a representative of Islam
Hmm.
and not knowing what you're talking about. The point being that regardless of whether or not he considers himself to be a dawah channel, he has made this video on the basis of being a Muslim,
Yeah.
and he is advertising this to millions and millions of people. This video didn't come up by accident.
Yes.
He's gone out there and he's actually been there and done that. And for every single eye, every single person that watches this video may count as something against him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And
Hmm.
that's a very, very serious thing to have on your plate that maybe this brother really hasn't considered. And I think that's one of the dangers about people seeking fame wherever it is, or seeking attention wherever it is, that not all of the attention is something that you want. At the end,
Hmm.
social media influencers, they're chasing the likes and this, that, and the other. But at the end, what does the difference of thousands or millions of likes of human beings matter if at the end of the day, your creator, the one that you're going to be responsible to, is not the one who likes it? In
Hmm.
fact, actually dislikes it severely. Then you've lost everything. And what was the point of it? It's just not worth it.
Yeah. That's yeah. That's why we are continue on this video, inshallah, and based on the one of the comment from our viewers. So let's just start. The a couple of things here, right? So the first comment there, it's about what are the examples of such. Obviously, uh, the brother here, Victor Rybin, he gone through the videos because I can see that he commented on almost every point that we discussed. So we'll start
Uh-huh.
with the first one, Brother Jamshid, right? With regards
Okay.
to what are the examples of such changes in scientific understanding? Well, I think he referred to the bit that we said, how things that were mentioned before, sort of, we kind of agree with the Quran, with the
Yeah.
science, and then science somehow changed that. So if you've got some sort of ideas on top of your head, and then we can discuss that, and then we'll see where we and how do we reconcile that, the differences, how that. Or in the beginning we said science somehow agree with what the Quran said, but now it's sort of different. So how
Okay.
do we reconcile that, and what's the difference between science and what the Quran says? And of course,
Okay.
Quran is from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, as we know. So yeah, go ahead.
Bismillah. Okay. So an example of where the science changed, the one that I prefer to use, is the example of the expansion of the universe.
Hmm.
So in the early 1900s, there was a very strong scientific consensus that the universe was static. which basically meant that all of the celestial bodies, they were essentially fixed in place, fixed in their orbits, and didn't really move around. The universe was of a static size. And at this moment in time, Einstein was working on his theory of general relativity, in which he was working on a model that. Now, don't pick me up on the particulars. I'm not a scientist, but try and understand the point that I'm getting to here. That gravity was essentially a byproduct of mass, and applied to all things. So it wasn't a separate attractive force. It was basically a result of mass of objects and this and the other. So essentially everything exhibited gravity, and the more massive the object was, the more gravity it had. And obviously that's an attractive force attracting everything. Now, the problem with this model was that if you consider everything, all of these celestial bodies, as having a lot of mass and therefore being attractive, just imagine them all as magnets. As they're moving around, they're going to start attracting each other. And I'm sure you probably, what's going to happen if you put a load of magnets on a table or whatever have you, you move a couple close together and boom, they all start colliding together. And that's what you would have expected for the universe, except that wasn't happening. So, in order for his theory to work, the only possibility must be that with the attraction there must be some kind of other force that's actually pushing everything further away from each other. In other words, the universe is actually expanding, and it's expanding at a rate that the attraction of these bodies don't cause them to collide. So his theorem accidentally led him to conclude that, okay, wait, the only way this can work is the universe must be expanding. However, the scientific consensus of the static universe was so strong that he couldn't bring himself to accept this conclusion, and therefore he invented what is called the cosmological constant, which was a factor that he applied in the formula to allow the universe to balance on this knife edge of, when you just perfectly balance the magnets so they won't attract each other, they're not repelling each other, and basically he just made the whole universe balance there. And for everything else, the formulas worked. And, he's hailed a genius, which he was, and everything was happy. So this was around about, I think, 1915, 1917, around about that area. And then after that, about 10 years or so later, in the late 1920s, Professor Edwin Hubble, who you may know from the Hubble telescope, I think he invented the telescope that began to look at faraway galaxies. And he noticed something called the redshift. Now, the redshift is when, now it's called the Doppler effect. It's when you have waves of something.
Yeah.
If you stretch the waves out or you squash the waves, the effect of it is different. So think of it in sound waves, for example. When you have an emergency vehicle with the siren, when it's coming towards you, it sounds one way because as it's coming towards you, the sound waves are being compressed as they're coming towards you. And as it's moving away, the sound waves are being stretched because they're being emitted as it's moving away. That's why there's that change in sound. And the same thing happens in light as well, that when something is emitting light towards you, if it comes towards you, those waves get compressed and it shifts towards the blue end of the spectrum. But if it gets stretched, it goes towards the red end. And that's what's called the redshift. So what he noticed was the galaxies in the far reaches, or the furthest ones away, had a noticeable red shift. Now you think, very slight tangent. How do you know the galaxies are tinted red? Maybe the galaxies are just that color. How do you know what the color is supposed to be?
Yeah.
We know what the colors are supposed to be because there's a finite number of chemicals, elements in the universe as per the periodic table and the way the elements are made up. We have those, present on Earth. And when you ignite them and burn them, they produce a very specific wavelength of light. And that's how scientists determine what composition different galaxies and celestial bodies are, because they measure the light, they see what frequencies of light there are, which corresponds to which kind of elements or whatever have you, and from that they can work out what the elements are or what the composition is made of. But what Hubble noticed was all of these light patterns, they had shifted towards the lower end of the spectrum, and the only explanation for that was that the light waves were being stretched, which must mean that the universe is expanding. So at this point now it's not just theoretical, now it's observational. Like at this point he's seeing it, he's measuring it, and it's now indisputable. And this is where the whole thing of the expansion of the universe came about. And Einstein basically said, oh my God, I discovered this like 10 or so years ago, but I hid it, and that was the biggest blunder of my career.
Mm.
Which it was. But this is an example of where, let's just say, for example, you had the Muslims around at the time, being challenged that, look, your Quran is stating something, that the universe is expanding.
Yeah.
We know it's not.
Mm.
We know, to the point that this consensus is so strong that Einstein deliberately fudged his formulas to conform to what this consensus was. And later it turned out that actually, you know what, it was actually incorrect. And what the Quran alludes to in terms of the expansion of the universe actually turned out to be closer to the reality or
Yes.
the truth. So that's just one example of where the science changes.
But you see, that's what you have explained here is also a good example why science is not all the top and gory and the correct thing, because you see someone like Einstein who somehow have a different understanding. They find thinking is
Yeah,
something different, but because the whole scientists somehow agree on this as the fact, as a, something as a fact, this is the truth, and no one actually able someone like Einstein hide his own understanding, because he doesn't want to go against that, because therefore science in itself is not perfect, right? So for anyone to come out and use science as a something to refer to is not always right. Do you get my point there? Or
yeah. I think what you're probably alluding to is what a lot of people don't realize exists is
yeah,
something called the philosophy of science.
yes, yeah,
So science in and of itself is not black and white. There is a philosophy
correct,
to follow. There's a
correct,
methodology to follow. Science itself, is based on various epistemic values, and not only that, you have to recognize what the limitations of science
yes,
are, and therefore what are the limitations in the inferences that you can draw from
mhm,
science. So, for example, science is very much empirically based. It's based around
yeah,
things that you can observe, you
observe,
can
yeah,
measure, whatever have you. And to therefore conclude a scientism view that, that if you can't measure it, then it doesn't exist.
mhm,
That view is actually quite fallacious because, for example, I'm sure many of us will say, our parents love us or we love our children or whatever have you. But how do you measure that love? What is the quantifying factor? You can't measure it. But you know it's there.
yes,
So, and then the scientists will say, oh, well, but you can observe the effects of it, this, that, the other. But there's an inference there now.
mm,
How
mm,
do you know what's the effects? Because some people will say, well, that's just biological nature driving you, or this, that, and the other. And then you have so many different competing standards. And this is the other problem as well with science, that science is not a thing. When people say science says this, science is not a unified, universal body that says this is it and that is it. Science is just a methodology. It's a process. People are applying this process and people come to their own conclusions. And in coming to their conclusions, people can also project their own biases into those conclusions as well. That's perfectly plausible. And
mm,
in some cases, those biases actually become very, very strong and powerful to the point where you could even be bullied if you don't conform to those biases. Like, for example, there is I was going to say a significant majority, but I don't have the number, so I'm not going to say significant majority. But there are people within the scientific community that believe in creationism,
mhm, yeah,
and there is and find no contradiction in that.
Mm.
However, you find the staunch atheists that have this position that, well, because science doesn't support creationism, I don't know where they get this from as well, because actually, if you understand the philosophy of science
Yes.
properly, I don't believe there is any difference there, but there is any contradiction there. But to them, their own. They actually then bully and penalize or whatever have you those that have this creationist viewpoint. There was actually a really good documentary on this called Expelled, I think. Expelled. There is a subtitle to it. Expelled. No something allowed. But that's a really good document. I think the full thing's on YouTube actually. But that's a really good documentary. It goes through, a lot of people who work in various fields of science that have views that the rest of the scientific community would ostracize them for just because it doesn't fit their view of what a scientific person
So
should say.
expelled, no intelligence allowed. That's
That's
what's
the
called.
one, yeah.
I
That's the
released
one.
in 2008. Yeah, about an
Yeah,
hour
it's
and
a
a half.
really good
Yeah.
documentary. In fact, actually, it's quite funny, right? Because there's part of it where they interview Richard Dawkins, and his his explanation of where life on Earth came from is just fascinating to watch. It's I'm not going to spoil it, but it's actually quite funny what he says when you take a step back and you just look at it.
So I'll just share it on the screen for the viewers, inshallah. Yeah. It's called Expel, No Intelligence Allowed by Ben Stein, I think. Is that
Yeah,
this one? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. I haven't seen it before. So we'll sit down and have a look at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you are quite right, Jamshid. Like, there are people who are not just, we talk about science, for example, even doctors, right? In a also called Western medicine. There are doctors who n- believe in creationism, and the way how we approach things is slightly different. So you see, the thing is, what the majority says somehow, we have to believe in this just because this is a so-called mainstream, but we don't have to. This is the science. In a science, if you were to accept that, then you actually go against the concept of understanding, being a science person as well. You have to be able to come up with some sort of explanation. So if
yeah,
someone were to claim something, you have to allow that expression as well, right? You have to allow that for that discussion. Just to shut down just because you disagree with the mainstream understanding at the moment, then that's it. Then we are against that concept of the whole science thing, where you're allowed to question, you're allowed to come up with a hypothesis, and have your own way of explaining things. And then that's it. You shut down the discussion. It's actually not good, not great.
I think the problem, like I said, is both sides don't know where their boundaries are.
Yes.
And that's the problem.
Mm.
That yes, science definitely has its place, right? So I'm not bashing science. I am a scientist.
Yeah.
Science has its
Same as
place.
same as me.
It allows us to, yes, doctor. I'm a computer
Mm.
scientist myself. It
Mm.
allows us to explain and understand our world. It allows us to adapt to our world. It allows us to use the physics, the natural laws, to our advantage. So, it definitely has its place, but science doesn't give us philosophical answers. Science doesn't tell us what we ought to be doing with our lives, whether, we should be charitable, whether we should be kind. In fact, actually, I don't want to say this from a scientific perspective, because I actually don't believe this, but there will be those in the scientific community that think that, there is a scientific principle in only the strong survive, or survival of the fittest, for example,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
evolution is based on this, which
Mm.
therefore then promotes this notion that actually, if you were to take your philosophies from science, you should actually be, completely cruel and selfish, and basically, obtain all of the resources for yourself, whatever have you, because at the end of the day, only the fit survive. And then you start to get into this other dilemma of, yeah, but you have to rely on social structure as well. You can't do everything by yourself, and it starts to get very muddy because it breaks down. So I think that's what people who are very heavily invested in the scientific paradigm need to understand. That look, science has its place and it also has its boundaries. It only discusses the things that are empirical, measurable. It only discusses things that are naturalistic. Anything that is beyond that, science has no knowledge of it, no say of it, and to assume that because science, there is no scientific perspective of that thing, that thing doesn't exist, that's just foolishness. So I think that's a proper boundary there. And again, not to just say put all of this on the theistic people. For theistic people, when something happens, they just, we do have those as well. They just say that, yeah, God did it. Okay, fine. Ultimately speaking, yes, but that doesn't negate that, there's also a scientifically sound explanation as well for that. So it just depends on how you're looking at it, and ultimately what type of answer you're trying to achieve. What's the purpose of the answer?
Good, excellent, excellent. Let's go to yeah, I think we covered it well. So, viewers, if you are watching this and you've got more questions, please do that, and then we will pick the next comment, inshallah, and then we can discuss that as well. So, next comment here, Brother Jamshid. The question then, who created God, is a response to the theistic who created the universe. If you frame the initial question differently, God is the uncaused cause, then the response will be different. Why is God a better uncaused cause than the world itself? So I think perhaps it's good to have that discussion a little bit on this. And this is the interestingly one after I read this comment actually, and I was thinking to myself, even when I was growing up, when I was little, you have this question. I remember this really well. I was in primary school many years ago, long time ago. I won't mention how many years ago. And I remember that, in the classroom, one of the my friend came to me and said, like, I have a very difficult question. It's a math question that you can't answer. And I said, what's the question? He said, like, we are Muslim, because, being in Malaysia, we go to, in our school, even in primary school, we have Islamic classes, when it comes for Zohar time, we actually stop our school, we go and pray together. So we very much, the whole concept, the education is also based around the Islamic teachings. So this boy asked me, he said, think about this. He said, can God created something so big that even a God himself cannot lift it? This is a mathematical question. I mean, we were all in primary school back then. We all tried to act like we are so smart, yeah. And this is the thing, like, so then who created? I mean, this type of question even came to us when we were in primary school, and I must say, I was a bit stunned. I said, like, oh, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. But this is all revolved around the same old thing. It's been there for many years, and we've been discussed so many times. But it's always been something that been the kids always comes out with, and someone like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, they brought these questions, every now and then, like same thing, same concept, but in a different way. You kind of word it in slightly different. You understand what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to disagree with you slightly, because I think that question is slightly different to this
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
But they do come under the common banner of the common tropes
Yes.
or the questions that have just been done to death.
Yes.
But they just keep coming up again because, for whatever reason, these neo-atheists, they just don't like the answer, even though they can't negate the answer. So with regards to the first question, let's go back to the comments, because we did actually answer this. And I think I noticed that his next comment actually relates to the answer. So let's just do the two of them together, right?
Yep.
So I think 830 says the reality doesn't need to have the ability to create anything, because the atheists don't claim something was created in the first place. Yada yada yada. Okay, so let's take this whole concept of who created God, why the universe needs a creation, whatever have you. So we know the universe exists.
Yes.
Okay, because we're here, and we will take it for granted that the universe exists. There is a whole separate question as to how do we.
Although Jamshid, I saw one of the videos. Sorry, just to stop you, because some people will say, no, we may not even exist. It's all just chemical, just being mixed.
Yeah, I was literally.
I come across that video.
Okay, I tell you what. Let's entertain that, right? Okay, so here we go. In 5 questions. Okay. Does our, for want of a better word, reality exist? Okay. Mm-hmm. And what do we mean by that? So we mean, does this reality exist in the sense of that it has consequences? Okay. Because also, what does it mean to exist, this, that, and the other? So I'm going to define existence in terms of that it has lasting consequences. So, to give you an example of something that does not have a lasting consequence, is your dreams. You can exist in a reality in your dream where you can do things and it will not have a lasting consequence. You will wake up and that's it, it's eliminated, nothing happens there, whatever going forward. The same with playing video games, for example,
Yeah.
in that your avatar, your character exists in a fantasy, in a fictional world. Whatever happens in that world happens in that world. You turn the game off, and that's it. It's erased. There are no lasting consequences. So you can do things in those realities that you wouldn't dare do in real life. Like in a video game, in a Spider-Man game, jump off a building, absolutely, what great fun. In real life, no chance am I doing that because there's
Mm.
going to be a lasting consequence. So, for anyone who says that our reality as we're experiencing it right now, if it doesn't exist, then prove it by
Mm.
doing something that would be completely absurd that you would only do in a fictional reality, like jumping off it. But I mean, obviously, I'm not advocating for you to do that. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that it's one thing to just arbitrarily make a claim; it's another thing to live by it. Because what
Yes.
actually happens is you will live in a way, in accordance that demonstrates that you know that this world is real. You will
True.
not just arbitrarily walk into traffic or do crazy things like that. And actually, if you do, and there are a few people that do that, you're probably, certifiably insane. In which case, there's a whole separate,
You're in an asylum. Huh?
then this discussion is, it's not for you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And from our Islamic perspective, you're freed from any kind of accountability and things like that. If you don't understand the reality of the world that you're living in. So, in terms of the question of
Who
is this
created
real?
God? Yeah.
Yeah, is this real?
Oh yes. Yeah. This is
There's
real. Yeah.
only one answer, which
Mm.
is yes. Okay. Yes and no, and the way I'm wording this question is also very important. That there are only two outcomes to the question. It can either be a yes or it can be a no. You can't say, "Well, the world is partly real."
Mm.
It's real or it's not.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
So once we conclude that yes, the world is our reality is real, it exists, then the question is, well, okay, did it begin to exist? Was there a period, a point in time where it didn't exist, and then it came into existence? And for the person that says no, it didn't begin to exist, what they're saying is that this reality, this universe, that whatever have you, existed eternally.
Mm.
And there's no evidence for that. There's literally no evidence for that because that would mean, first of all, that there is an infinite history of previous events. Okay, so every moment had a previous moment, had a previous moment. If you have
Yep.
an infinite history of events without any beginning, this moment right now would never arrive.
Mm.
But the fact that the arrow of time has reached this moment
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself suggests that there had to have been a beginning for this moment to occur and every subsequent moment thereafter it, the chain of causality.
Yes.
And not only that, we have obviously other evidence as well. For example, the one we just discussed, which is the expansion of the universe. You rewind everything back, and everything originated from a singular cosmic event that, neo-atheists or atheists, they love to just term it as, well, the universe was infinitesimally small. I'm sorry, what does infinitesimally small mean? I mean, put a number to it. The problem is they can't put a number to it because literally it's zero, but they can't say zero because it makes no sense because they're talking about creation from nothing, which they don't want to say. So they'll just say something stupid like infinitesimally small. But the point being that from every single scientific paradigm, there is all of the evidence points to this universe had a beginning. In fact, in the book, I think it was called A New World by Bord, Guth, and Vilenkin, published in 2007, I believe one of their conclusions was that that I'm paraphrasing it now because I can't remember the terms exactly, but there is no hiding behind the eternal this eternal universe, that you have to accept the notion of a cosmic beginning, basically, that there was an ultimate beginning to this kind of reality. Now, the way that atheists and scientists get around this now is they come up with this idea of the multiverse, and maybe this, okay, fine, this universe began, but then there was a multiverse behind it. I'm sorry, this is just literally pure fantasy. It's pure fiction. There is no scientific evidence for it. The only place that this multiverse comes from is a desire to scientifically explain where this reality came from when there was nothing there to create it. So they've invented this multiverse thing. And the weird thing is that they're all happy to invent and to go along with this factory, but they're not happy to invent a deity, or to go with the creator. It's a separate discussion. And they also forget that the creator of a thing in and of itself is more complicated than the thing.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? So you think of anything, you think of a car, you think of a factory, you think of anything with some degree of technical precision. The factory, the thing that makes that thing, is more complicated than the thing it's making.
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So if there was a multiverse or a multiversal universe generator, that would require an even higher degree of explanation than just our own reality. You can't escape this question just by throwing it into, oh well, there's a multiverse there, and we've got no way of proving that. I'm sorry, that's literally that's literally just the atheist thing of, where they say, theists say, oh, God did it. That's literally just the atheists say, oh, the multiverse did it. No, I'm sorry, it's complete nonsense. Anyway,
the simplest explanation is the easiest, right? This should be the best answer, Yeah.
The simplest explanation was the truth. Anyway, the simplest explanation with the most explanatory power basically is the one that tends to be the truth. Anyway, so back to this question 2 now, which was, did this universe have a beginning? For the person that says no, I'm sorry, you've got an uphill battle, and you've got pretty much the entire scientific community now against you in saying that that our universe is eternal. It had a beginning. There was a point where it didn't exist, and now it does exist.
Yes.
Okay. Not to mention the Big Bang, the unexplained heat death, the background microwave radiation, and we can just go on and on and on. Okay. So then the question comes. I mean, we could go further into this, but actually, let's go further in. Okay, so it had a beginning. Now the question is, did that beginning, did it have a cause? Was there something that triggered this beginning to happen? And now, if you say that there was no cause, that this beginning just magically happened, again, there's no scientific basis for saying that the entire creation, origination of our reality, of every single molecule, every single atom, all of the energy, everything, it just happened for absolutely no reason. Yeah. And to assert that much would completely undermine science in totality. Because can you imagine now that if you've based your entire reality on this principle that, oh, it just happened, imagine now any scientific theory. Why is the water boiling? It just happened. Yep. Why did this happen? It just happened. I'm sorry, there is no scientist in the world that will ever accept it just happened. The principle of cause and effect requires that there is an effect that this reality was created. There must have been a cause, right? So for someone to turn around and say there was no cause, I'm sorry, that's just not going to be. There must have been a cause that originated our reality. Fine, okay. So we get past that. So that's the third hurdle, right? So then in question 4 would be, fine, this cause. Was the cause something self-created? Was the universe its own cause, right? Or was the cause something internal to the universe or something external to the universe? And again, this argument could be likened to the question of, can a woman give birth to herself?
Yes.
It's paradoxical. You have to exist in order to perform the function of creating, as well as not exist at the same moment in order to be created. It makes absolutely no sense for in one moment, and I'm choosing my language carefully here because at the end, when there is nothing there is actually technically no time. That's a higher scientific thing. We'll get into that right now. But but I'm mentioning that because I know someone might pick up on it, and I don't want you to think I don't know what we're talking about. I know what we're talking. You have to not exist to be created, and exist at the same time to create, as well as obviously having the ability to create, which there is nothing in our universe that demonstrates this. Suggests that the cause of the creation of our reality cannot be our reality itself. Our reality has no means of creating anything, in fact. If you think about anything that exists comes from something else that already exists. Our reality is just changing energy into matter into different forms and vice versa. Nothing new, it's essentially a closed bubble. No new energy or material comes in and no energy or material leaves. That's actually a scientific principle that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It only just changes forms. So this notion of the reality doesn't need to create. It would have the need to create, or it would need to have the ability to create, as one part of the answer for self-creation. But anyway, I think we can put that one aside. That if someone wants to argue that the cause of reality existing was reality itself, that has no plausible scientific basis whatsoever. And therefore, the only other explanation is that the cause of our reality must be something external to our reality. So that external thing, now we can ask, was that external cause of our reality itself something created? And again, yes or no. If the answer is yes, then we go into this infinite regression. Okay, where we ask the same thing, what caused that, what caused that, what caused that? And ultimately, you're never going to have a solution, which means this reality is never going to exist. But the fact is, it exists. So we know that can't be the case. So whether the answer, and this is the thing I think that atheists get stuck on as well, is that, look, if you want to say the cause of that was the multiverse generating machine, fine, okay, you can have it. I don't care. Right, and you want to say, we're still going to ask the question, where did that multiverse generating machine come from? Yada yada yada. At some point, there needs to be a stop. There needs to be something that, by definition, was uncreated, and that is what we're talking about. Is the ultimate cause of the rest of reality. I want to give you this exercise. Imagine, for example, you were to step outside, okay, and you were to see a chain hanging down. Now you can see each link in the chain is being held in its place by the link above it, right?
Yes.
Gravity is pulling it
Yep.
forward, and each link is being held in the chain. So
Yes.
if I was to say what's holding this link up, you'd say the link above it, the link above it, the link above it. Absolutely. But my ultimate question when I'm saying is what's holding this up is what's right at the very end. There has to be something at the very end that's being fixed into place unexplainably. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're talking about. Now, what's holding the entire thing up? I don't care about each individual link in the chain. I care about something that happened all the way at the end that starts this whole process off. So through these 5 questions, the only way that the atheists can get away with explaining away some notion of a creationism is either they will have to say that either this reality doesn't exist, it's not real, but they don't live their lives like that, or they will have to say that it didn't have a beginning, whereas all of the scientific evidence points to no, there was a beginning, or they'll say that there was no cause, or that, and again, undermine science completely, or that the cause was itself. Not a single example of self-creation anywhere in the history of the world, or that there was an infinite regression of events. These are the only plausible, sorry, not plausible, they're not plausible, they're completely ridiculous, but these are the only get out of jail free cards that an atheist can use, and they're completely worthless. So that is why we say that this whole idea of, well, who created God or whatever, that the question is meaningless, because ultimately we know for our reality to exist, there has to be something that existed necessarily. And there's a couple more steps to say why we believe it's why we personify it as Allah or God in that sense. But putting all that aside, there has to be some kind of a necessarily existent creationalism, creating power that existed that brought the rest of nature into existence, or the rest of our reality into existence. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah,
So
makes sense. Yeah.
that's where that comes from, and that's why, coming back to what I said earlier, that if you actually understand scientific principles and theories properly,
Hmm.
that science will drive you to this notion, because science itself, if you understand where science leads, it can only lead to this.
Yeah, yeah.
It can only lead to this. Otherwise, you have to invent absurdities, like, for example, the multiverse. Like, I'll give you one example of some stupid absurdities that come across. So I met Lawrence Krauss
Oh,
when
yeah.
he came to do his debate with Hamza. And I asked him basically about this whole notion of self-creationism and things like that, and what the scientific basis of it was. And his answer, essentially paraphrased, was that, look, basically, the question is, how do you get something from nothing? And he says, well, from nothing, zero, you can get a one, and you can get a minus one. And we know we've got the one in the reality. We're just looking now for the minus one to cancel it out, and that once we find that, that'll explain how you get something from zero. So yeah, you're just playing stupid gymnastics now with
Wait.
you
How does it even make sense?
from zero, you get one and minus one. One is the matter. Now you need to find the antimatter that cancel it out, and that proves that apparently out from nowhere, mathematically speaking, is possible to get something from nothing. But Yanni, if you're going to
Yeah,
start talking about mathematics in that kind of reality, you also have to contend with the impossibilities in mathematics as well.
yeah,
For example, infinities as an actual. Like, you can't have an actual infinity. It's infinitesimally small and things like that is completely ridiculous. And if you want to see something infinitesimally small, like say it was millions, billions, trillions of years ago or whatever have you, right? You can assign perfectly big numbers to things. That's not a problem.
Mhm.
But don't come with this infinity, because those numbers that you assign are so stupidly small compared to, well, they're insignificant compared to infinity. I mean, I'll give you an example of a really big number
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
used.
I'm just
Go
gonna
on, sorry.
put it there. So if we earn one, zero, and then we're gonna look for minus one, and we find something called minus one, and we are one, does it mean we don't exist then?
Yeah, I have no idea how this. You know,
I'm sorry, I'll be hung up on that question. It's like, like this is the point, right, Jamshed? Like, all this sounded so smart. The explanation sounded so smart, like as if you come. It actually means nothing. If you put your mind to it, it's
it's
actually nothing.
nothing.
It's
From a
rubbish.
practical perspective, it's nonsense.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
absolute nonsense.
Yes.
It's just there to placate people who've already got some kind of a conceived idea, and it just they're basically just trying to prove their own conclusions already. Something that they've already concluded.
Sorry.
I mean, just to give you an idea of a very big number, let me give you an example of a very
Yep.
big number.
Yeah.
So,
Sure. Sure.
Professor Roger Penrose, who is he is basically second to Professor Stephen Hawking in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, and we all know who Stephen Hawking is, but we don't
Yep.
know
Yep.
who Professor Roger Penrose is. So it's kind of like we all know who Batman is, but very few people have heard of Robin. Just to give you, I know a lot of people have heard of Robin, but you know what I mean. It's like you don't really know who the sidekick is, but this is just to give you an idea of what his standing is, right? So he wrote a book called, I don't want to say it was called The Emperor's New Clothes. It was called The Emperor's New Mind, I think, or something like that. The Emperor's
Yeah.
something. I think it was published in 1809, I think, or
The
thereabouts.
Emperor's
Anyway,
New Mind concerning
The Emperor's
computers, minds, and the laws of physics.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this book, he was discussing the accuracy needed for the initial conditions of the Big Bang to form a life-permitting universe. So not the universe as it exists now, any universe that would permit life. And he concluded that number to be 10 to the power 10 to the power 123. Okay? Now, just to give you an idea of how stupidly big this number is, just give you an idea. When you say 10 to the power 5, that means the number 1 with 5 zeros behind it. Okay, we can
Mm-hmm.
write it. If I say 10 to the power, 100 is 1 with 100 zeros. Okay, I can write this. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if I say 10 to the power 123,
Mm-hmm.
that is a number 1 with
Mm-hmm.
123 zeros behind it,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
So you take that number,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that number is, right, is bigger than a Google. A Google is 1 with 100 zeros behind it, so much bigger than a Google. And what he's talking about is you take 10 with that many zeros behind it, and that number, it's 1 in that chance of the universe, being life permitting, formulating by chance, right? Just to give you an idea, and this is where the numbers become stupid now. Let's imagine you just want to write this number down, okay? Forget the actual size of the number. If you just want to write this number down, if you took every single proton and neutron in the entire known universe and wrote a 0 on it, you took 1 and put 1, and then you wrote a 0 on every other one in the entire known universe,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have enough. You would fall far short. In fact, it's so ridiculous that let's just imagine that this multiverse machine, this universe generator existed, and it produced 1 million universes every 1 millionth of a second,
Mm-hmm.
every second from the Big Bang, which was 14 billion years ago or 13.75 billion years ago, to
Yep.
this moment, and you collected that stupidly ridiculous number of universes, and you collected all of the protons and atoms in those universes, and you just etched a 0 on them, you still wouldn't have enough just to write the number down. And he's talking about the odds of a life permitting universe formulating by chance is 1 in that size of a number.
Wow.
Do you see how
Yeah.
ridiculous this becomes? And what I'm saying is that scientifically, you can talk about stupidly big numbers, but don't cop out with, the universe was comprised of an infinitesimally small number, because using this infinite now is just basically a way to say, it's impossible, but we don't want to say it's impossible, or there was divine
Yep.
interference or whatever have you, because that's not scientifically valid. No, I'm sorry. There's you don't get to just cop out like that by just pretending it was just complete chance.
No, that's good point, Jamshid. Well put. Well put. You see,
Thank you.
my brain. My brain is not that smart. So when I heard those numbers, it's just like I'm going to like how you go on the Windows error,
Yeah,
error, error. That's it.
yeah. It just literally makes no sense. But people think, and they just think that, well, there is a chance. It's like, no, mate. I'm sorry. There is literally no chance. There is no way in the world that you would bet on those odds.
That's right. That's right.
And then they come up with this stupid thing. Is, yeah, but if you consider infinite time and this, that, and the other, eventually that might happen. Infinite time where? What? There is no existence for this infinite time. There's no one flipping a coin or whatever have you, just generating all of this. It's complete fiction in your mind.
Mm, mm, mm. No, that's
And
right.
what is supposed to be a sign, a very clear sign that, look, there is divine intervention here,
Mm,
that this was created with purpose.
yes.
There were deliberate design choices here for various constants within our reality that in and of themselves make no sense, but except without those values, we would not have a life permitting universe. Those are supposed to be signs for you to recognize that there is something that is the ultimate cause of everything, and that something has intelligence and purpose, etc., etc., etc. behind it. But Yani, you just get the idiots that come, oh no, I just think it just happened magically by chance. Yani, honestly, if you're that shallow in your thinking, there is nothing that you
Mm,
won't believe. I could just say anything to you, and by odds, it would be true. Like, Yanni, I don't know if you've ever seen like Bollywood physics, right? Where you have the policeman, he peels a banana and uses it to slash a person's neck or whatever have you. Just crazy things, right? But by those standards, everything's got a chance of existing.
yeah.
You could say that, like Hamza's example of this is great. It's like, you could say that your mother was a pink polka dotted elephant that was born on Pluto and flew over here on a carton of milk.
There's a
There's a
chance. There's
chance.
a chance. Yeah,
When
yeah.
you become, there's a chance, and
Mm.
everything breaks down. Then you want to call yourself intellectually superior when you're talking about those kinds of things. I'm sorry, no, that's just not going to happen. No, no, sorry.
Ah, it's
So
cool.
yeah,
No, it's good.
I think we've
Good,
done
good.
that one.
No, no, that's good. I mean, look, I can listen to you talk about this is good because you see, I'm a very like, every time someone came and tried to give so smart an answer, asking all, those big word, quantum theory, all this infinitesimal, whatever
Yeah,
the words is, I just like, look, it's just too hard. And I think, it makes more sense to believe what's simple that, that someone
yeah.
created it just like anything else. You don't accept that this phone, this watch, this computer, anything comes out of nothing. I guess there's a chance that this microphone
No,
here,
bro, let me tell you something. A Lego figure, right? Can you
a
just
Lego figure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, just pull up a Lego figure, right, on the screen. You
Put in
look
a
at how
box.
look, just put up on the screen a picture of a Lego figurine, a man, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
a Lego brick, just a
Yes,
Lego brick, right? You just look at how simple this thing is. A
yes.
Lego brick is probably one of the simplest, easiest to copy things, right?
Hmm, hmm.
Or something like that. You could say there's a chance. Yet, if you produced that and started selling it, the Lego company are going to sue you. And you know
Yeah.
why they're going to sue you? Because they're going to say you copied it. There's no way you came up with that. That's not an accidental thing.
Yes.
Because they're going to recognize it with even something that basic, that that was not some that was there was a design in it, as
Mhm.
something as basic and simplistic as that. So I'm sorry, the reality doesn't bear true to this notion. Also, one thing I wanted to come back to, just things as simple as that. I'm sorry,
You
there's
know, you know,
design in that, there's
it,
patents around that, and
that's
there's,
that's one thing, right? But like all these small bricks, right? You have to
yeah,
put together to design something, right?
yeah.
And then like you just take a box, put all these bricks together, leave it there, see how many years before it started connected together, or even
Even that,
shake it, even you shake it, yeah, you shake until it tries to stick together. It just doesn't
no,
happen.
no, do you know what? That's the best thing as well for the, with evolution just happens or whatever have you. Yeah, if okay, fine. If I get a rock, how long do I have to stare at this rock before this rock develops sentience? It doesn't just happen like that. You just not gonna. It's just not gonna
Uh,
happen. I'm sorry that there are other factors involved. And I want
yeah.
to, before I forget, I want to go back to this question that you raised in a similar state about,
Oh yeah,
can God
the can
go
God
ahead?
create something so big that
Right,
it's big enough that God
right.
cannot lift it
Okay.
up? Yeah, yeah.
So let's go about this and let's understand this another way. So if we're talking about God, the deity, whatever have you, the one who created all of the laws, that all of the one who created all of the laws, and therefore all of the laws are subject to him, that he can break the laws or whatever have you. That's the whole point of being the creator, that you are not subjected to anything.
Mhm.
So when we can't lift a rock, for example, what's actually happening here? We can't lift it because the meager amount of power that we exert from our muscles and our bodies cannot overcome the power of gravity and pulling that rock down. Okay,
Yes.
that's actually what's happening.
Mm.
That there's a power play here, and there are two opposing forces in play, and at the end of the day, we just simply can't generate enough. So when you're talking about can God not lift it, you're basically trying to say that the one who created all of these laws is not able to exert enough power to break one of his own laws, or
Mm.
basically can God set about to do something
And put
and
limitation.
fail?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is such a ridiculous notion
Yeah.
that the question itself is meaningless. Just because it makes sense linguistically, that grammatically it's a correct sentence, it it has literally no validity contextually in reality, in the subject matter of what you're talking about.
Mhm.
It's like asking, can you make a circular triangle?
Triangle. Yeah.
The very notion of a triangle is
Yes.
that it's made triangle. There's three angles on it. There's three straight sides to it. So to have that as, we apply these labels to shapes, so that we have a common understanding of what we're talking about. We apply the label a circle to something, with basically a single side, it's a curve, whatever have you. To then try to attribute one label to something else which is designated with another label, that's just nonsense. You're just playing around with language. There's actual no intellectual thought going on there. That's you've not come up with anything novel. You've not come up with anything clever. You've just come up with and just demonstrated that you actually don't know what you're talking about. Hence,
That's
why
pretty good.
this comes up from neo-atheists
Hmm.
rather than the older traditional atheists that actually recognize the stupidity of these kinds of questions. This is only like the new stuff now, where people think, "Oh no, look, we're so clever because an influencer answered this," and the poor person they were talking to maybe just didn't understand how to respond in a way that made sense to them.
Mm.
But I think that's basically the problem. So yeah, these questions are dumb. Stop asking
Yeah.
them, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Summarizing what the questions are dumb. Okay. But the same question keep being asked on the at the Hyde Park. Maybe it reflects something in the Hyde Park.
Because the people asking these questions just literally don't have that intellectual capacity to understand the answer. And they don't understand the answer. And because they don't understand the answer, they think there's no answer. It's again, the same scientific fallacy of, oh, because I don't understand it doesn't exist.
You know what you
Okay, do
should
you know
do,
what?
Jamshid? You
Go
should
on then.
totally go to Hyde Park again. Print out a big banner, right? It says, "Tell me why God doesn't exist." And you just stand there, and you can see how many of them actually gonna come and ask you the same questions that we just discussed. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Maybe.
And it will be a nice, interesting video. But anyhow, we're almost an hour now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I said, we can
Oh,
go
okay.
on and
Wait,
on
wait,
about this. But
we got other questions he had. What
yeah,
what what else did he have?
I want to go to the just a couple of you more here, right? What in the beginning it says, what does it mean, self-proclaimed atheist? You mean he might lie about his belief? So I guess the to hide the truth, I guess we kind of mentioned this a little bit that when people say self-proclaimed atheist, essentially they say they don't believe in God, and then they have a better understanding of certain things. That's the way how I see it anyway.
Yeah,
With the
yeah.
questions,
Let me answer that. If
yeah,
self-proclaimed atheist means that the person themselves said it either directly or indirectly that they're an atheist,
yes,
rather than me or anyone else presuming they are and projecting that
mm,
onto them
yes,
that they're an atheist. That's basically it. It's like we understand their belief and mindset or whatever have you from things that they said
hmm,
rather than things that we presumed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and like I know, a lot of people they say they're atheists, but when you actually ask them, they're actually more agnostic rather than an atheist. And but this is the label that people assume.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Yeah.
actually, I've experienced this a lot the other way around, where a lot of people, if you ask them, they'll say they're Christian, but when you actually get into their beliefs, they're culturally Christian,
Yes.
but they're actually in reality atheists.
Mm-hmm.
We also have this a lot interestingly as well, and this has also been my experience as well with the Jewish community as well. That culturally they're Jewish, but many of them actually don't believe in divinity and a god or whatever have you. Though they do believe that God promised them some particular land. It's a very strange contradiction there, but yeah. So what we mean by self-proclaimed atheist is basically, or what I meant when I think that's something I might have said, is that the person said something that directly or indirectly said that he doesn't believe in
I
a
think
creator.
I think in that video, I mean, I'll have to relook it again. I forgot already, but I think it's the guy in the video who actually says, I'm an atheist." That's what he said. I think that's what I think it is.
Maybe, but then
Yeah.
why is the question being directed to us? But okay, hello home.
Okay. No, I think the last part here, we're gonna skip this the 2016 because I think I'm not too sure. I think we discussed about how, if you don't know and you are saying something, then it will be you yourself destroying the deen because, don't go on something like I think in the brother mentioned about, I believe in evolution, right? And yeah, yes, it's a contradictory with Islam, but it's okay. I think that's the path that he mentioned. The question is all about. But I think, essentially, I think we kind of go through in that video is, that we don't want to be saying something that is not true, especially in terms of the matters of deen and the matters of religion, because when we say something, we are speaking on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we speaking on behalf of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's very important to be very clear on what we say, right? So I think that's
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
the gist. But the last one, Jamshid, I think we should end on this question. And I've got my answers on this. I want to hear from you since you are my guest. and you're much more expert than me in this. So the question is, why not just say that there are no scientific facts or miracles in Quran? If there were, then they wouldn't change in the future because God Himself revealed them in the Quran, right? But instead of saying that
Mhm.
scientific miracles are nonsense, you say that you shouldn't rely on them too much. That we shouldn't rely on the science too much. Do you get the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't. Okay, so there's a lot of ambiguity in the question that it could mean something. So I'm going to go with it the way I think what he's talking about.
Hmm.
So a statement that I really like is something that Dr. Zakir Naik used to say a lot. I say used to say a lot. I'm sure he still does, but his outlets have been shut down. Is that the Quran is a book of signs? It's not a book of science. Okay, the Quran is not a book of science. It's a book of science. So what do we mean by that? The Quran is a book of revelation for mankind to know who they are, what their purpose of creation is, how to live their lives, what's going to happen afterwards, what they need to do to achieve success, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So it's spiritual guidance in that sense. That's what it's revealed for. And in that stead, when God or the Quran is appealing to the reader to reflect on their position in the whole cosmos, in the reality of things, to recognize how small and finite that we are, and that, to not think of ourselves as too grandiose and
Hmm.
this, that, and the other, and to recognize all of the favors applied upon us. The Quran points to various things that we should look at as recognition of favors that we have been bestowed with. Okay? The Quran is not saying, look at this scientific thing here, you're going to discover this at some point. Look at that scientific fact there, you're going to discover this. Look at this scientific thing here. The Quran doesn't talk like that. That's not the purpose of saying this. The Quran is talking about, look at, we're expanding the heavens, and we're doing this and we're doing that, and look at the nature of creation, and look how we've composed this, and look how we've constructed the sky, and whatever have you. And all of these things are supposed to be put you in awe, for the thinking person, to put you in awe. So that's what we mean by the Quran is a book of signs. It's not a
Yes.
book of science. And the point of where the scientific inquiry comes into this is the level of where the Quran talks about naturalistic phenomena, that the language that the Quran uses uh, never strays away from what the reality actually is. Okay, so it could have been very easy, considering the hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of, pointing to nature that the Quran uses, for there to be some mistakes. And look, the Quran says, look at this, but and it mentions something that's completely incorrect,
Hmm.
or something, something that that demonstrates a flawed level of reality. It would be very easy for that to happen,
Yes. Yeah.
considering the Quran was revealed 1400, 14 and a half centuries ago, in the middle of the desert. The fact that it doesn't do that, and we're recognizing more and more and more that how accurate these statements are, these should be signs that are, making us think of, wow, there must be something here. I mean, I'll give you an example. So if I was to ask our listeners that, look, imagine you wanted to convey the idea that, imagine that you wanted to address someone who denied resurrection, right? And said that, look, it was impossible, it would be impossible for any deity to resurrect a person. Maybe we might we might mutilate their body and burn them and whatever have you, do whatever we want to them and basically erase it. It would
Hmm.
be impossible for that person to be resurrected. Now, how would you convey, in a very pithy, in a very short but poignant way, that actually, no, it's completely possible for that person to be resurrected? What would you say? And I actually did this with someone once, and I was surprised that he actually got the answer right. For example, would you say, and I want the people listening to this, think about this. Would you expect, the Quran to say that, we can resurrect you down to every single cell in your body, or we can resurrect you to every single hair on your head, or whatever have you? What kind of a statement would the Quran make to make the notion that you're going to be resurrected exactly how you are? That
Mhm.
would not only make sense to the Bedouins that it was revealed to, so
Yes.
it needs to
Yeah.
make sense for them. It's revealed in their language, but
Mhm.
also for every single nation and generation that followed.
Mhm.
Right now,
Mhm.
what are they going to understand about the cells in their body? They don't know anything about that. If the Quran said we're going to generate you exactly every single cell in their body, they don't know what that means,
Mhm.
right? We're going to resurrect you to every single hair on your body. We're going to put it back in place. Yeah. What about I'm losing one. Well, so am I going to be resurrected as I was with a full head of hair, or with most of it missing, or this explanation doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different stupid ways it's going to come.
Yeah.
So and I actually tried some one person, he gave me the right answer, right? And his answer was that, okay, and it, someone with intelligence would probably write it down. Like, if you wanted a timeless statement, we'll resurrect you down to your very fingertips. Why? Because your fingertips, right down to your fingertips, okay, right down to the edges of your body, you can understand it then. But in later times, we recognize that, okay, these fingerprints are unique to people. Even between identical twins or whatever have you, they're unique to the per person. So when the Quran says for someone in our time now, will resurrect you right down to your very fingertips, we know that for the most part, that means that every single detail will be there. You'll be an exact replica of what you are.
Mhm.
Guess what the Quran says in the beginning of Surah Al-Qiyamah in response to this exact question? It
Mhm.
says to the people who doubted, we will resurrect you right down to your very fingerprints.
Mhm.
And there are countless examples of this. So the point is that the Quran doesn't say that, look, you're going to discover in the many centuries' time in the field of criminology that, fingerprints can be used to identify people, this, that, and the other. The Quran doesn't say that. It doesn't talk about that. That's
Mhm.
not within its scope.
Mhm.
But it does allude to that your fingerprints are something that will uniquely identify you, which we know from criminology is actually true. And my point being that it would be very simple for the Quran to have just said something stupid like, the hair on your head or whatever have you, if it was from a false source. But because it's from, the creator of reality, the source of all knowledge, it's full of these statements that conform to what established reality is. And that's what we mean by there's no scientific miracles in the Quran, or that's the wrong attitude, because the Quran doesn't talk about these
Mhm.
things in a perspective of science. The correlation with science is just that what we've discovered of all of the things that the Quran could have said, everything that it says
Mhm.
conforms to what we know to be the established truth of reality.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the Muslims as well, we also, I think, we need to get out of this idea of, oh, look, the Quran conforms to science, therefore the Quran is true. Like,
No, no, no.
why we don't need to put science on that high of a pedestal?
That,
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 yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's that's
we
the point, Jamshid, right? What do you say?
yeah,
Sorry to cut you off. I just want to make a point
yeah,
while you make that point there.
yeah,
Is science is we the creations, human beings, with
yeah,
our limitations, right? Using our brain with some limitation. We can't even see what's behind our skull, right? Unless you do an X-ray or scan, whatever it is, yeah. And we, on the other hand, the Quran is the book, the guidance come from the Almighty Creator. It's our
mhm,
Lord, our God,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
how can you even compare the two? It's not on the same level.
exactly,
But we have this some sort of inferiority complex that we have to sort of,
exactly.
no. This is what I said when I was meeting with the kids last month, yeah, in Fiji. I said to those kids, I said, look, what makes the scientists, the Muslim golden age, Al Khawarizmi, Ibn Sina, and all those, they
Yeah,
are great. They are not just because they go on the science, but these people also understand the Quran, the science of the Quran and the Hadith of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So they live as a Muslim, and then allow them to actually go and look into all this, science understanding. They go and explore. It's because of that. That what makes them great. That what make that science great. It wasn't for them, the phone wouldn't exist today. The phone
Exactly.
wouldn't exist. And I was telling
No.
the kid, the kids,
Yeah.
like on the watch, for example, on the watch, right? This is called Arabic dials. The Arabic dial. Why?
Arabic numbers.
Because
Yeah.
no, not Arabic number. The dials is actually called Arabic dial because there was a Muslim who came up with
Okay.
these things. You see?
Okay.
It's called Arabic
I know the
dial.
numbers are Arabic as well because
Yes,
the whole base 10 system,
yes, that's right. Yeah,
the
yeah.
Muslims came up with it. Yeah.
It's because the Muslim, the Arabs, the Arabs at the time who come up with this thing. And back in those days, other people of different background don't have that understanding yet. So what makes these Muslims great is because of their understanding of Islam, and the sign will just come naturally through that. So don't need to feel like you have to compare somehow conform to the society. No. And the thing is, if you look at the Quran, like what you said, it's book of science, right? And maybe a little bit of portion that we pick, this come from this, therefore science is good. The rest of the what did it talk about? It talk about your manners. It talk about your
Yeah.
attitude, how you deal as in the community, your how you should live your life, how you should not cheat, how you should not lie. That's the majority of the contents of the Quran. It talks about the hellfire, it talks about the heavens. What is it? What are you aiming? Are you looking for? And that will be the next
Yeah.
point there, Jamshid. 72 virgins, and that's will be our next topic, inshallah. Since you get that question, I'll give you time to prepare for it, inshallah.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get one of the scholars as well with us, inshallah. So there's a whole concept, right? And why do we need to feel like we have to sort of in tune with science?
We don't need to, but
Yeah.
we have a rich history behind us. Actually, it's
Yes.
just that it's actually been, I don't want to say lost. It's been hidden. This is a very small, quick tangent, but there was a point in time, like as you said, scientific methodology was invented by the Muslims
Mm.
at the time when the Muslims were exploring
Yes.
the nature and the makeup of the universe.
Mm.
The Europeans basically were living in what's called the Dark Ages. Now,
Mm.
you look at the history books. The history books never really explained what happened, but the
Yes.
Dark Ages coincidentally coincided with the time when the Muslims entered Europe.
Mm.
And from, if you look at the history books, basically we don't know what happened. Magic happened, and all of a sudden we came out of the Dark Ages and we had all of this technology and new understanding and this, that, and the other. And at this period of the Dark Ages, the reality is that the Muslim world was the center of the world.
Yeah.
Was the center of the world. That basically, as English is like the default language of the world today, it was actually
Mm.
Arabic back in the day, that people would travel to the Arabic world to go to the universities there to study in the Arabic world.
Mm.
And believe it or not, it was actually the Arabs then, or the Muslims, that were translating the books, the knowledge, and the research from different cultures. And I believe, for example, like the Greek works and whatever have you, they were translated all into Arabic, and preserved in the Arabic universities, when the Greeks were then burning their own works for wherever have you.
Mm.
Believe it or not, like the people claim, the works of Aristotle and Plato and yada yada yada, they were preserved by the Muslims. And here's the fun part: when you start entertaining the notion that the Muslims, as they were translating the works, they were actually correcting the errors.
Yeah.
And then when the Muslim world fell, which is a whole political thing, right?
Yes.
And the works were then being translated back. They were being translated back with newfound understanding and the errors already fixed or whatever have you. But West or European history, you have the Muslims to thank for preserving it,
Mm.
because
Mm.
the Muslims were the ones that preserved it. I mean, for example, this idea that Da Vinci was such a genius, he came up with all of these concepts and this, that, and the other. No, he didn't. He read it from Arabic books that now are hidden away from you, and basically regurgitated the ideas as his own.
Mm.
If you have a look, there are evidence for lots of his things that pre-existed him, but
Yes.
people just don't know those names now.
Yes.
So we don't need to feel shy about this. We just we
And,
just need to take back our history and take back control of it.
yeah, well, it's essentially right. They see all those science in it's improve our betterment as a human being,
Yeah,
right? That's what it is. Our mobile phone, what we do, our platform that we use at the moment. So we thank for that, Alhamdulillah. And then we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to prove anyone, right? And we don't have to. We have to suffice that, to understand that this is the book. And the thing is, my main thing, as I say to almost everyone who came and asked me a question about Islam and whatnot, I said, just think about this, right? Think about that Quran is a guidance how to live your life. Okay, we talk about all the other issues that we have nowadays, mental health, for example, and it's a big thing, a huge thing in the West. On the other hand, places where there are poor nations, people who barely have food to eat, mental health is not really the majority, not really the issues here. And again, I'll talk about being depressed, and I say this a few times, yeah, before. I said, the people who deserve to be depressed are the Palestinians in Gaza, right? They are the one that are going through so much difficult and hardships. It's terrible. It's a
Yeah,
one-sided thing that happened at the moment, right? and
yeah,
and and people over there, we see this on the social media. People, the families, what they concerned about, at nighttime to sleep together, because they rather being bombed and all of them die together, rather than them waking up the next day, they know, so and so, my daughter or my son passed away and I'm still alive, or vice versa. People are
yeah,
more, look, we're gonna die, let's just die together. That's better for us. And on the other hand, with we suffer from all the other issues. And the Muslims in Palestine is a very good example. Allah, this is why, someone like Megan Rice, I believe she's an activist in the US, who became Muslim recently, and I think she talked about
yeah. I know.
the
Yeah,
resilient of being a Palestinian, right? She said she's
yeah,
just curious to know why there's so much resilience in Palestine, for the Palestinian people. What makes them so resilient? And one of the comment from Instagram, sister, you should look into the religion. Their religion, what makes them strong, who they are. The same thing is the religion that make Al-Khawarizmi, Ibn Sina, a great scientist.
yeah.
Uh, this is the thing, right? So Alhamdulillah, Brother Jamshid, I think like I say, we can do stream. We probably should start doing 5 hour stream like some of our brothers in the UK do, and then we probably will be interesting discussion, live discussion. Alhamdulillah, but Alhamdulillah, Brother Jamshid, I think it's good, and inshallah, we definitely will continue it again. Do you have anything else to say to wrap up the whole discussion today? And then you love talking, so I don't. I know, and I love listening to you. So
Oh,
let's
thank
do
you.
it.
Okay, look. So, all
one
right.
one conclusion, one wrap up, and then we'll
One,
end there,
one,
inshallah.
one, one, one conclusion. Okay,
Yes.
we live in a time when Muslims make up at least 1/4 of the world's population.
Mm-hmm.
Muslims are everywhere and united on a very solid belief in a creator that is ultimately responsible for everything and to whom we are accountable to. And that belief leads to our consistent practice of Islam, in that we practice the prayer 5 times a day. We practice fasting in the month of Ramadan. We do all of these rituals and things. My point is that our Islam, we don't do this thing where there's another nation, another group of people that just say, "Oh, my religion is just in my heart." They'll behave any way they want to, but they say, "Yeah, I pray in my heart," or all these kind of platitudes that actually have no manifestation. That for any reasonable thinking person, you have to wonder, how is it that 1 in 4 people, at least 1 in 4 people, have this firm belief, this firm commitment to this way of life where essentially we've shackled ourselves away from certain things. We don't drink alcohol, we don't gamble, we don't do, we don't uh, indulge in some of the things that the world has to offer because we'll wait for something better in the hereafter. That it would be very foolish for anyone to think that we're doing this because we have no idea of the reality. That for you to think that, there's something wrong with you, that you've been conditioned to think that, and you've been conditioned to think that way because the people that have conditioned you don't want you to recognize your own freedoms that Islam actually offers you. Very simple. I'm going to go off a slight tangent. Is, for example, the whole notion of how we treat our women. For example, and I
Yep.
only had this. I was in a group. I was discussing this. A non-Muslim orientated group discussing this. Where the women in that group, they were talking about going to a wedding and how it's so difficult. What are they going to wear and this, that, and the other, and whatever have you. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, Islam just eliminates all of this. You don't need to dress, to please other people, whatever have you. There are so many things that give you freedom, yet you've been conditioned to think that there's something wrong here. What I'm calling for you to think about is, look, over one quarter of the world's population believe in this, and we believe in it for a reason. Don't do yourself a disservice and think that you know why we believe in it is because we're not thinking. No, we actually know what we're talking about. We are just as intelligent as you are. Give us that credit of humanity and do yourself a favor to look into it a little bit more for yourself. And you may find answers there that you didn't know existed because they were hidden from you because you were conditioned to think otherwise. Allahu
Beautifully
Alam.
said. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Jamshid. Jazakallah khairan. We'll see
Yeah.
you again soon, inshallah. As always,
Inshallah.
we'll try to do it regularly with you. And I enjoyed all the discussions, and I enjoyed learning from you as well.
Likewise.
Uh, Barakallahu feek. Dear viewers, if you find it's beneficial, do forward and share. You're most welcome to clips and reuse the clips. It's not a problem for us, alhamdulillah. And we'll see you again next Friday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.